We've now transitioned into the year 2021, and it would be inappropriate for me to kick off the year with anything other than a Skylanders video. So naturally, we're going to take a blast of the past and recreate an old video that I must have made all the way back in 2018, almost 3 years ago, known as the Top 10 Dark Skylanders variant. So of course we are excluding the dark element because that's an element, not a series of variants. But when it comes to the variant series of the dark class of Skylanders, it can be any figurines available. It can be characters, it can be vehicles, it can be gimmick-based characters, and so naturally this list isn't really based around how good the actual Skylander is in terms of their performance and their gameplay. It's more so based around how good the Skylander design is and how well the dark colour palette blends with their design. And naturally, I have speculated in the past of the channel also about Skylanders that should have gotten dark variants. I did that with Nolan, so definitely be sure to check out that video. It's an oldie but a goodie for sure, so you really be missing out if you don't check the description for that awesome collaboration I did almost 2.5 years ago at this point. Man, time flies by, I tell you. But regardless, I cannot wait to get into the first top 10 of the year, the top 10 dark Skylanders variants. And also, what do you think of this here introductory angle? Thought I'd mix things up a little bit. For number 10 on the list, I was certainly contemplating as to whether or not put Dark Turbocharged Donkey Kong on this slot on the list right here. But really, when it comes to this variant, sure, it looks really damn cool, but it does not mesh well with the design at all. For darker tones, for this character, you know, Donkey Kong being a traditional good guy, the yellows and the reds all made sense because they were colourful, almost superhero-like, and really brought out Donkey Kong's muscular superhero type design almost. But really, with this tone, he looks more rather villainous and sinister, and because of that, it's ultimately the tone that from the colour palette brought out by this dark variant that makes it so that the colour scheme really does not work well with this design whatsoever, and it means that it can't really get past the honourable mention spot. So instead, at number 10, I wound up putting in Dark Turbocharged Donkey Kong's vehicle, the Dark Barrel Blaster, which is easily the best of all of the dark vehicles, probably because it keeps the red Donkey Kong, which is still a dark red. It blends in well with the black and maintains the tone thoroughly throughout. It stands out more than what it would have if DK was silver instead. And on top of that, this is made out of wood and barrels. You know, this dark wood just has a more cleaner type aesthetic that just feels more like wood. You know, the texturing alone is very good and it feels like wood as you rub your finger along it, but that's not unique to this vehicle. Of course, you get that from the original vehicle as well, but as you can tell, the yellows, the oranges, the reds and the whites, they just don't have that kind of tonal colour palette to make it just so seamless and blend together like wood normally does. So this dark wood type aesthetic given to the Barrel Blaster, and on top of that the details such as the little wood chippings and patterns that go along with, of course, wooden based vehicles, is just what makes the dark iteration feel that more fitting and deserving of this hair colour scheme, making it the easy number 10 on this list. Number 9 is going to be Dark Wildfire, who has the same kind of standout design amongst the dark variants as what the Barrel Blaster does have, since of course he has his red shield with a really detailed lion's face upon it. You know, makes this guy look all beast-like, and so the detail there is unparalleled. And as we head to the back here, the black is rather bulky, and so because of that, the blacks and the silvers don't carry over the same contrast as what any regular dark variants would. But honestly, this guy was definitely the best Trackmaster for the job. You know, his design is easily one of the most sinister amongst all the Trackmasters, so giving him the dark variant definitely fits. It's contrasted enough as is, even if the colours are rather blocky. You know, his entire face is silver and then his entire back is black. So it's ultimately that lack of contrast in colours that does push Wildfire down on the list for me. But still, that sinister type look and just how much cooler the dark iteration of Wildfire makes the design as a whole look, and then you contrast that with the reds of his flames and the detailed shield makes for one very impressive figurine and being worthy of a number 9 inclusion here in the list. Next up at number 8, we have Dark Slobbertooth. Now, I actually really like Dark Slobbertooth. I think the elements of his colour palette that they changed up were basically perfect, because now his shell and, of course, his armour and his headgear have more of a tough, armored type feeling to it. It really adds to the intimidation factor of the design, so it's an imperfect expansion upon the design and really brings out this character's headstrong type personality. And on top of that, the silvers and the blacks are perfectly contrasting with a perfect amount of each colour, so you're not overwhelmed by a single use of a colour. It doesn't feel blocky unlike Wildfire, so that sharper contrast is ultimately what makes this figurine look more pristine. And as I said earlier, it has that intimidating look to it because the armour looks so much more tougher than it would regularly, and the silver tail combined with the black flesh and scales just looks really, really damn cool. And I really appreciate that he took Slobbertooth and improved his design tenfold by giving him this dark colour palette that really meshes well with Slobbertooth's personality and what he stands for. Excellent choice for a dark variant, and I'm glad it exists, to say the least. But next up is going to be Dark Spitfire. I love the fact that all of the fire from Spitfire here is black. The curl here just looks so cool with that black colour palette. You know, it's ultimately the moulding, and you combine that with the silver and the black colours to make it so contrasting and have such flow to it as well. Of course, the fire as it curls around has small little carvings and patterns to just truly give it that awesome flow to it. And so above all, it's really just how seamless this colour palette was woven into this design, and how much the colour palette specifically adds this design that makes it just such a sharp, contrasting eye catcher that is so pleasing visually and makes for such a stunning figurine. Coming in at number 6, we have Dark Washbuckler. What's so great about Washbuckler is that he has so many parts to his design. You know, he has the hat, he has the tentacle-based mustache, he has both of his weaponries, his sleeves, you know, the bottom of his tentacles, and so naturally this leaves a lot of room for the blacks and silvers to really sharply contrast each other and look vivid and stunning, and they took that to their full advantage with this variant. Just look at it. It's glorious. They changed up so much from the original design. It barely even resembles the original design, and it blends well with the character's personality as well. This darker tone really works for a pirate type octopus. You know, blues aren't really natural colours that you find of octopus. Octopuses are normally that red type colour, so since the regular Washbuckler doesn't have those natural colours to it either, using the argument that this looks not all that natural doesn't really work here, because this is a cartoon octopus we're talking about here. So I will gladly accept the blacks and the silvers so long as the colours contrast each other nicely, and that's exactly what this variant here aces. And it really adds to the moulding too, because thanks to the moulding we can really see the difference between the silvers and the blacks due to how the tentacles curl, and it's the same for the bottom of the mustache. So no matter what angle you look at this figurine, it looks epic, and I really appreciate that attention to detail. But next up on the list is Dark Golden Queen, coming in at number 5 for the same reasons as Dark Washbuckler, because she has so many different parts to her design. She's so well built up, and so because of that, the blacks and the silvers can be used much more sharply to further contrast due to just how many different parts they could alter the colour palette for. And the blacks really bring out the detail on her sleeves, the patterns and all. They contrast more vividly and really add to the overall aesthetic of the figurine. And because, you know, she is a being made of pure gold, sure, she's not exactly golden anymore, that could be considered a flaw. but she still has that black and silver to truly feel metallic, armored up, and more intimidating. So effectively, she's a combination of what works about Dark Slobbertooth and Dark Washbuckler. So of course, by extent, she is worthy of the number 5 spot on the list right here. Now, next up on the list for number 4, we have Dark Snapshot, just shy of the top 3. And what makes him just shy of the top 3 is the fact that he does have rather blocky colours, you know, especially around the back. You have the silver pads on his shoulders, but then for the rest of his alligator-based body is black. It doesn't really bring out a contrast upon his tail or the spikes along his back, which are definitely well textured. But that was easily forgivable due to the fact that the silver pads really bring about greater detail than what the regular colour palette does. Like, seriously, look at these. The scaling on them is rather crocodile-like and really draws attention to the design choice and the creature that this design is based on. I said alligator before, but I'm pretty sure he's based on a crocodile. After all, that is incorporated into the pun of his catchphrase, croc and roll. But enough of spitting for straight facts here. What I love about Dark Snapshot is the fact that, of course, the weapon is blue, and the blue meshes very well with the blacks and the silvers. It really feels in element for Snapshot, and you combine that with the yellow and the black eyes, it's all more contrasting and sinister. It just has a really nice tonal shift that is so much more vivid and personality driven than that of the original Snapshot. So overall, this is a significant improvement over the original design. It really works, and it stands out for all the right reasons, and it has a sharper colour contrast than Wildfire, which is what makes it the far superior variant in my personal opinion. But receiving our bronze medal without a shadow of a doubt is none other than Dark Hammerslam Bowser, who you can even see the reflection of my TV back there, because, man, these spikes look so cool in silver. It's such a sharper contrast to the rest of his shell. It really makes him feel armoured up and intimidating. And above all, this is such a sinister design for such a sinister character. He is a villain in the context of the games and the franchises he is from. So this dark colour palette is really fitting for his design, and not to mention his mold too. Of course, he's given off kind of like a victorious, arrogant, intimidating type pose, and so the blacks and the silvers express that personality so much more vividly than the original colour palette does. And of course, just as any natural dark variants do, the colours are extremely contrasting and eye-pleasing, to say the absolute minimum. And I also like the fact that his tuft of hair up here is red rather than silver. It keeps the history and the context of the character intact, because his hair is just so iconic with that colour to it. So they chose the correct colours to settle with, the correct elements of the design to change, and so above all, taking this design and applying this variance colour palette to it is beyond perfection, and I love how it looks. But Blast Zone here receives the silver medal, fitting that, considering that silver is a huge part of his colour palette, purely because he's an original character. Dark Hammerslam Bowser isn't. He's based on a pre-existing character, so it's almost the lack of originality that prevented Dark Hammerslam Bowser from getting better on the list. But Dark Blast Zone here, whilst I certainly wish Igniter had his spot as a dark variant instead, this basically exemplifies why a Skylander who is effectively a massive chunk of armor works so well with a dark and silver color palette, because it just has that metallic feeling to it. The armor really stands out, and because of that metallic feeling to it, it feels like armor. It basically works for all the same reasons as what Dark Golden Queen does, but here the name isn't lost in translation. He still feels like an absolute force to be reckoned with. This still maintains that blastful nature with his bombs, and the fact that they are black just meshes better with the rest of the design than the original colour palette does. And I also like the fact that his fire is red still. It maintains the iconography of a character, and so nothing is lost in translation, even though there is a hair on the shoulder pad that's annoying me. But still, that shoulder pad, now that's brought out just how much detail is upon it. Like, seriously, it has that battle damage to it to add to the intimidation factor of this Skylander even. And it looks so cool. And that alone is what makes Blast Zone here worthy of a number 2 spot on the list right here. Dark Omega Spyro is a character who takes the design and the look of the original Dark Spyro and multiplies its awesomeness by 10,000 because the long horns, the detailed encarvments on them, of course, the wings, the sharper scales, just ultimately makes this character look really cool with the contrast and colours, really intimidating, and above all, they use this as an excuse to incorporate a completely different backstory into this character. This character is unique in the context of other variants because it has a completely unique backstory to its original counterpart, Spyro. But that wasn't brought about by the Spyro you see before you, because sure, whilst this is a great expansion upon the original design, and it looks so much cooler than it, ultimately, in the end, you still can't win out over the original. That's right, guys, the very first Dark Sparrow gets the gold medal on the list, beyond deservingly, because for the lines and the details are brought out by the silvers and the blacks. It looks so detailed with, of course, the scales too that run along his head and down his back. Whenever you say the word a Dark Skylander variant, this is one that comes to mind because this is the trend setter. It got released in a regular starter pack for 3DS, so because of this, people were eating up them 3DS starter packs just so they could get a hold of this elusive, badass looking figure. And he also has the exclusive right of having been released in a single pack, which in the UK was exclusive to Tesco. He is original, unique, stands out. He is the trendsetter for these Dark variants. He is the original and still the best. I could not get more passionate about this variant because it's personal to me. My friend grew up with the 3DS versions of Skylanders, which meant he had this version of Spyro rather than a regular one for the 3DS version of Spyro's Adventure, alongside a copy of Ignited that he had before me. I wasn't jealous of him at all. But with all of that being said, that gave him such a deep and personal connection to this character. He loves this character, and by extent, I do as well. That amount of personal love towards the character cannot be said for the other Dark variants. So just that personal aspect of him is what brings out the best in this variant in my eyes. You guys obviously aren't going to have the same experiences, so I could see why you could argue that other darker variants look cooler than this, but ultimately you don't get much cooler than this, with just how much details are brought out by the sharp and contrasting colours of the silver and the blacks. He set the trend for other Dark variants to come, and they are basically just an expansion of this incredible design that kickstarted a great variant series. And we can thank Dark Sparrow for all of the, hundreds of pounds to be dished out on those Dark starter packs year in, year out. And that makes me just so much more appreciative of him. But I have rambled on long enough. You guys get the gist about my love for this character. So I'm going to end off the video here, and I will, of course, be seeing you in the next one. But until that moment arises, peace. And thank you so much, as always, for watching.